All right, so imagine waking up to the news that an entire region could be reshaped overnight. That's what we're diving into today.
Yeah, this is big.
This whole thing in Gaza, it's intense, and we're going to be looking at it through the lens of this Al Jazeera article. They're usually pretty sympathetic to the Palestinian side.
Yeah, important to keep that in mind as we unpack this whole thing.
Absolutely. So the big news, and I mean big news, is that Israel is saying they took out Yahya Sinwar.
And this isn't just some Hamas guy on the street.
Yeah.
Sinwar was the head honcho of their political bureau, basically running the show.
So this is like taking out the head of state almost.
In a way, yeah. After Israel took out his predecessor, Sinwar became the guy calling the shots for Hamas.
Wow, so this isn't just about one man. This is about potentially changing the entire leadership structure of Hamas.
Exactly. And that's why everyone's watching Biden's response so closely. He called Sinwar's death a good day for both Israel and the U.S.
Good day. That feels kind of understated considering the potential fallout here. What's the U.S. angle here? Why is this good for them?
Well, the U.S. has been pushing hard for a quick end to this conflict and getting rid of a powerful figure like Sinwar. It might open the door for talks with new leadership, someone more willing to find a peaceful solution. At least that's probably what the Biden administration's hoping for.
Biden even hinted at this. He said something about an opportunity for a day after in Gaza without Hamas in power. That sounds a lot like the U.S. wants to completely change who's running things in Gaza.
It's definitely a loaded statement, and it raises some big questions about what the U.S.'s endgame really is. Are they just hoping for a change at the top, or do they want to dismantle Hamas's control over Gaza completely?
And where does Israel stand on all of this? They've been pretty quiet so far, haven't they?
Well, Netanyahu's been saying publicly that Israel's mission is far from finished.
Yeah.
Remember, Israel's been dealing with the threat of Hamas rockets for years. They might see this as their chance to really cripple Hamas for good, not just by taking out one leader, no matter how important.
So we've got the U.S. sensing a chance for a political solution, and Israel maybe aiming for something more permanent, a total dismantling of Hamas.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. Because if the U.S. and Israel aren't on the same page about the end game, that could mean even more chaos in the region.
And what about the people stuck in the middle of all this? What happens to the everyday people in Gaza if Hamas is gone or even just weakened?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Right.
It's easy to talk about regime change, but there are real people's lives at stake.
Right. We can't forget about that. It's easy to get caught up in the geopolitical stuff, but it always comes down to people.
Exactly. And that's where this Al Jazeera article really hits home. They quote one of their senior political correspondents basically asking, is all this violence really going to make the Middle East a paradise?
It's a good question. And it shows how skeptical people are about all this, especially in the region.
Yeah, and you can't blame them.
Yeah.
Even if Sinwar is gone, and even if Hamas is totally out of the picture, that doesn't just magically fix everything.
Yeah.
This conflict has been going on for decades.
It feels like we've seen this movie before. Take out the leader, cross your fingers, and hope for the best. But what usually happens? Usually more chaos and violence.
Unfortunately, you're right, and that's what worries a lot of people, including Al Jazeera. What happens if there's just a power vacuum in Gaza? Who steps in? Is there another group even more extreme than Hamas, just waiting for their chance?
That's scary to think about. And think about the potential for things to get even more extreme. If Hamas supporters think Sinwar was taken out unjustly, won't that just make them angrier at Israel? And could that lead to even more violence?
It could. That's a real danger. And it shows how complicated this all is. Just taking out leaders, even the dangerous ones, rarely leads to peace.
It's a tinderbox waiting to explode. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and the whole thing could spiral out of control.
We can't forget there are so many different groups involved with their own goals.
Yeah.
We've talked about the U.S. and Israel, but what about the Palestinian Authority? What happens to them in a post-Sinwar Gaza?
Right. And don't forget about Iran and Egypt. They're both involved in what happens in Gaza.
Exactly. There's so much going on here. Each move could have a ripple effect that no one sees coming.
And to top it all off, this is just the beginning of the story.
Exactly. We don't even know for sure what happened to Sinwar Hamas. Hasn't even confirmed anything. And even if he is gone, trying to guess what happens next is like trying to predict the weather months in advance.
So many moving parts, so many unknowns. It's like we're trying to read a map that's constantly changing right in front of us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this whole thing so crucial to watch. We need to pay attention to every new piece of information, every opinion that comes out, and we can't just believe anyone who claims they have it all figured out.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about countries making moves on a chessboard. It's about real people's lives hanging in the balance.
It really reminds us how important it is to think for ourselves, especially these days. There's so much information out there, and it all comes with an agenda.
So how do we filter through all that noise? How do we make sense of something this complicated?
By never stopping asking questions, by looking at who's giving us the information, looking for proof, and most importantly, being open to the possibility that the truth is way more complicated than any one story is telling us.
That's what we always try to do here on the Deep Dive. Dig a little deeper and give you the tools to make up your own mind.
And never forget, behind every headline, every policy decision, there are human beings whose lives are changed forever by these events.
This whole situation in Gaza makes you think about some really big questions about the future of that region, the role of the rest of the world, and how we even solve conflicts in the 21st century. We don't know what's going to happen, but we can definitely have these conversations and think critically about the different possibilities. So as this story keeps unfolding, we'll be right here with you, diving deep into all the complexities and giving you the background you need to draw your own conclusions. And hey, let's be real. No one has a crystal ball. We can't say for sure what the future holds, but we can explore the possibilities and think about what we hope to see happen. So here's something to think about. If Hamas were out of the picture, what would you want to see happen in Gaza? What kind of future would be best for both Israelis and Palestinians? It's a tough question, but it's one worth thinking about. Keep learning, keep asking those tough questions, and keep the conversation going. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.